Welcome! This is the Rustic Songbird podcast, and I'm your host, Lydia Walker. This show is for you if you're ready to learn more about the craft of songwriting and take your skills to the next level. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get started. Today, my guest on the show is my good friend, Naima Johnston-Bush. She is here to share her story of songwriting, music, ministry, and how that all came together in her life. So I'm excited to share some of her story with you today. Naima, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be able to talk with you.
Yes, I was recently involved with Naima's Facebook group. She has a Facebook group called The Refreshing Life. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you are.
The Refreshing Life, and I was a guest poster in that, and I was just so impressed by the community and the positivity in that group, and I just thought that's so needed. And so props to you for getting that started and for putting good things out into the world.
Oh, well, thank you. That was definitely God inspired. Came out of being very, very ill about 2 years ago and realizing that, my life was passing me by and I wasn't enjoying it very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to encourage people to live a joyful life, a refreshed life. And so that group was born out of that.
Wow. So that's something that you needed, and you
Yes.
created it for someone else to be able to help others in the same boat.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
And that is awesome. I know you've been doing music for a long time. You're a singer, you're a songwriter, you've got original music, and you've led worship at churches and played at different events. So tell me a little bit about your backstory and getting started in music.
Well, I grew up in New York City, and my father he is still, he's a writer, and he was in a band. And I can remember as a really little girl, him having band practice. And so we couldn't sleep because they'd be out there playing like the bongos. They were doing this 70s, early 80s music. And, they'd be making all this noise. And so my brother and I could never sleep. And because we could never sleep, we would always go out into the family room to see what was going on. And I remember just sitting there and listening to the band and thinking to myself, well, I think I want to write songs. And I grew up at a time, I didn't grow up in the church, but I grew up listening to a lot of what I like to call, the great 70s divas. So like Shaka Khan and Randy Crawford. Those are the kind of my musical influences, a lot of Stevie Wonder, Motown. But my dad also listened to a lot of opera, and he listened to a lot of music from the 50s and 60s. And recently, I was home visiting my mother, and she pulled out this piece of paper and she said, I think this is the first song that you ever wrote. And it was called Bubble Gum Boogie.
That's awesome.
It had like 4 lines, and it was about get your dance. Well, I don't think it said get your dance on, but it said something like, we're going to dance, we're going to shout, we're going to clap about to the Bubble Gum Boogie, y'all. I don't know.
That's great.
So I'd been writing. My grandmother was a writer. She's a poet. I'd been writing for all my life. And then just started writing songs. And I probably was about 10 or 11 when I got really serious about it and went to the High School of Music and the Performing Arts. A lot of people know it's the Fame School. And then went to college for music and decided to stay in Ohio, which is where I lived for quite some time, and then moved to Nashville. And during that whole process, I was writing, and I became a Christian. I started traveling ministry, and I put out my first CD project. And there had been maybe a 10-year lapse in there where I was really focusing on my career. I was working in education and not writing or doing music. And then I started writing again when I became a Christian. And I wound up working with a producer by the name of Freddie Rodriguez. He was on the Hosanna label. He produced my first CD project. And it's always funny how, I think most songwriters can remember the first song that they wrote that really felt like this song means something. It's not something I just, put together, but this song means something. And the very first song that I wrote after that 10-year lapse was a song called Everything. And it really was about a broken heart. I had this broken heart. I had been in love with this guy and I just knew he was the one. And it didn't work out that way. And so I remember just crying and praying about it and feeling like the Lord was speaking to me and saying, you know, I am your everything, not this person who can break your heart and leave you. And I wrote that song. And I think that really was the song that kind of defined the rest of my songwriting experience from that point to today. So I really
It's so powerful.
What'd you say?
It's so powerful to write just from your experience, from where you're at, and put your heart in the song. I think that takes the writing to the next level, because then it's not just a song that sounds cool, and it's not a song that you're just putting out there and having fun with. Like, it means something, like you said. And I think that's what takes it to the next level, is it's got a piece of your heart in it.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, what's funny is that I recently was in New Orleans doing some ministry work, some music and some speaking, and I found my iPod, you know, like the old one that has like, you know, all this room. So it's like 1,000 songs on it. And I plugged it in and was just playing through the songs. And one of the songs that came on was one of yours.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was the song about the beautiful butterfly.
Yes, butterfly.
And I was listening to it and I was thinking, how many people still need to hear this song? You know, we write these songs a lot of times out of, like you said, our own experience, but we forget that songs are really made to be shared with the world. And we're just really kind of reflecting, I think, our testimonies, our stories, so that they're blessings to other people.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that whole experience thing, I think most of the things that I write have been about things that have happened to me that I'm trying to share with the world, because I feel like I can't be alone in this. I can't be alone in this broken heart, or I can't be alone in this struggle and I'm sick. I can't be alone in you know, wanting to know God better. I can't be alone in loving my husband the way that I love him. So how do I share these stories with other people who are experiencing this, or need encouragement, or need joy, or need hope, or whatever they need? A song can do so much.
Right. And you're not the only one that feels those things. And so when you are able to articulate it in a song, it connects with people, because they think, oh, wow, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. Or wow, that's exactly how I feel, but I didn't know how to explain it. And this song explains it so perfectly. And you can also use that as encouragement for somebody who's like just a few steps behind you. Like if you wrote a song about your single journey, and then now that you're married, you can still share that song with other people that are still walking in singleness and learning that God is enough for them during that time, and that they don't need a man to complete them, but that God can complete them. And so I love that you shared that about your song, Everything, that the Lord can be everything you need, and it's his timing that he's working out for your good. And so reminders like that are so helpful to people that are still walking through that and struggling, because they can see, I'm not the only one, and it's not going to always be that way. It's a season of your life, and it's okay to, you know, have those feelings, but just know that it's going to pass. It's not going to forever be a struggle, you know? And so I think that's awesome. And I love that part of your testimony as well. Could you share a little bit about meeting your husband and how the Lord worked that out for you?
That's an amazing story. I actually had just moved to Nashville. I hadn't been there very long. I think I moved to Nashville in April, and in October, I got this really odd email message, and it was when MySpace was still very big. It was a MySpace message, and it was from my husband, and he was asking if I would come to his church and do a concert. And I remember asking him afterwards, I was like, well, how did you find me? And he was like, I just Googled gospel singers in Nashville and you came up. And I knew that must have been, I knew that was God, because, you know, how many gospel singers are in Nashville? Why would I come up out of all those people? And I had only been there at that point 4 or 5 months. And so I went and I did the concert. And I remember afterwards, he was like, well, I'd like to take you to lunch. because I want to thank you for coming. And I was like, oh, I don't need to go to lunch. I know my way around the city. I'm good. He's like, no, I want to talk to you about ministry. And I was like, oh, well, I'll talk to anybody about ministry. I was like, okay. And I wound up going out with him for lunch. And on the third date, he told me that he was going to marry me. That when he pulled me up on the website, he was like, the Lord spoke to me and said, you were my wife. And I thought, stalker, this dude is a stalker.
It's a good thing he didn't mention that the first time you met him. He waited to the third date to bring that up.
Right. Exactly. And I just was like, this can't be it. But the funny thing is, the more time we spent together, the more I could see that, it really was a match. I always say my husband is not perfect, but he's perfect for me. That God really just kind of formed him just for me. And so we wound up getting married in 9 months. We dated and got married in 9 months. And by that point in time, I was older. I had just turned 39, and I had gotten to the point where I was like, it's never going to happen for me. But there he was, right? When I got to that point where I was content. No, I wasn't content. That's not even true. It was more along the lines of, Lord, if this is what's best for me, if being single is what's best for me, then I accept that. I don't like it, but I accept it. So I was there, and then there he was. And I remember when we got married, we had decided that we were going to write our own vows. And I sat down and I wrote this song called Beautiful Surprise, because when you get a certain age, people begin to say things to you like, you have more hope of dying in a plane crash than getting married after 35, or, the older you get, the less likely it'll ever happen. And so I remember thinking, well, here I was with this beautiful surprise, this thing that I never expected. And I started the song with that line that somebody told me it was too late, and all my life in vain I'd wait. Because, we have our thoughts, but God has his plan. Right. And it's a question of waiting for his plan to come to pass. So that's kind of how my husband and I got together. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know you've got a lot more to your story, but I did want to ask you to share a little bit of the illness that you walked through, and like how you were seeking the Lord through that healing process. And, how did that affect your writing during that time?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. What wound up happening was I had been traveling quite a bit in, I think it was 2016, February of 2016. And I was I was already kind of sick. Like I would eat something, not feel well. I was tired all the time. And I just kind of thought, I was the heaviest I had ever been weight-wise. And so I just thought, I just need to lose some weight. But I kept getting sicker and sicker. And I remember by the end of the month in February, that particular February was so crazy because there were 29 days. It was a leap year. There were 29 days. I think I did 24 ministry or performance events. And I woke up it was a lot. And that first week in March, when, we usually take a rest, I woke up and I couldn't even stand straight. Like I couldn't walk straight. And my entire stomach had swollen up and it had gotten really hard. And so we went to the emergency room and I had a CAT scan done, and they told me that I had non-alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. So I had liver disease. And I had the worst doctor. We were in the emergency room and he came in and this is what he said to me. My husband was like, well, what's the problem? And he said, her liver is dead. And I was thinking, that can't be right. If my liver is dead, why am I still alive? And of course, we were like, well, we're going to have to go find a specialist. And my mother flew in, and I spent a good 4 or 5 months just laid out on the couch. And I didn't do much writing. I didn't do much writing because I was really just trying to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to be doing with my life at this moment in time? What wound up happening was I lost over 100 pounds. And I started this very strict regimen my mother had put me on of like some natural supplements and some food choices. And I began to see a specialist and I got my strength back. And then they changed the diagnosis to what's called compensated liver disease. which means that my liver is functioning and I'm not on the transplant list. Because at first it was, we're going to have to look at putting you on the transplant list. And lots of prayer, lots of wondering why. And that was really kind of where I sat back and I was asking the Lord, you know, I have done all of this stuff. You know, I've traveled. And, you know, when you first start out in ministry, but a lot of times when you're in music ministry, you have this thought that it's going to go a very specific way. And it didn't go the way that I thought. And was that still valuable? Because I love Nashville. You know, Nashville's my favorite city. I'd live there again if I could. But if you're not prepared, Nashville can really eat you up. It can eat you up spiritually, because there are a number of people, not everybody, but there are people there who follow a very strict, this is the type of music we're gonna accept. This is the only music that's acceptable. This is the look that we're looking for. And like I said, not everybody is like that, but I ran into a number of people like that. And so I sat there and I thought about my life and I asked myself, was what I had done as valuable as looking to be on K-Love one day? And that's when I realized that I had been living without this joy, that I had lost my joy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I had kind of stopped writing for a while. And then as I came out of that, I just felt this overwhelming need. I felt like the Lord was saying, there are so many people living without joy, without thankfulness, and they're living without prayer because they're so busy doing that they're not stopping and sitting and spending time, you know, seeking me. I want you to tell people that. I want you to refresh them. And that was kind of how the Refreshing Life grew, and my whole ministry focus changed. And I began to write again. And a lot of the things that I was writing at that time were really kind of straight out of scripture. They were based out of scripture, a lot of the Psalms, a lot of worship music, and then a lot of what I like to call challenge music, because I felt like it's all been said. You know, we've said it all 100 times and we've said it all the same way. And I don't want to write, although I love a lot of the songs, I don't want to write another song about broken chains. I don't want to write another song about, you know, what words are there that describe the Lord that we never use? You know, what are the feelings that we feel? How does it feel when somebody says to you, your liver is dead? You know, you feel like almost like you're drowning. You know, not that you want to say, oh, I'm scared that I might die, because I was at peace with if I did, that I would be in the presence of the Lord. It was more like, did I do everything I was supposed to do? Did I touch every life I was? And I didn't feel like I had, because I felt like I had gotten caught up in too much other just like stuff. And so I think my writing now really is reflecting, it's a lot more thoughtful, I think. And it really is challenging, because I'm really at a place where I don't want to say it the same way it's been said 100 times before. So I've been praying a lot, you know, for what I like to call songs from heaven, songs that really meet the need. And I remember I took a class with a lot of people may remember Dottie Rambo, but I took a class with her daughter, Reba Rambo McGuire. And she would always say, you have to stir up the gift. You know, scripture tells you to stir up the gift. So you should be writing every day. Don't wait for inspiration to just hit. You know, the Lord is always with you. So you should be writing every day. And so trying to practice that, because I think for me, for a long time, it was, I'm not really feeling inspired. Or it was, oh, something happened. Let me write a song about it. And so trying to stir that gift up every day and to write and to believe that God has something he wants to say. I just need to have the ears to hear it so I can share it.
Yes, I like that you mentioned that it's practice, because, yeah, if we write every day, it might not be our best writing, but it's something. Right. And it just keeps that flow going, so we're open to receiving. And then I think we do seek more. I know I like to sit down and pray when I'm, you know, writing in my notebook and ask the Lord, what do you want me to write today? What do you want me to say to people through this song? And so just being open to what he has to say to you, even if you're not feeling particularly inspired.
Right.
I think is really cool. And one thing that really stood out in what you just said was being willing to ask those questions and just dig deep and say, you know, how can I say what I'm feeling in a new way? How can I bring out a piece of God's character that we don't talk about as much? How can I do something that hasn't been done a million times? And
Right.
so I think when we ask ourselves those questions, it does stir up that creativity
Right.
and gives us an opportunity to put a new spin on it, do something new. And that's what we're made to do as creative people. The
Right.
Lord doesn't want us to just be another copycat of
Right.
what's been done before. He wants us to really dig deep and to share from our perspective and our experience. And that opens up so many opportunities
Right.
to write new songs and to connect with people in a different way. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I would like to encourage our listeners to really dig deep and ask those questions. What do I need to
Right.
say in this song? What do people need to hear? And is it going to come across in the right way? And could I say this in a more concise way? Could I say this in a more poetic way? Could I say this in a new way? So asking those questions can really bring you to some gold ideas for
Right.
your songs, and just things that you may not have come to that conclusion if you just ran with your first idea, but really stirring that up. So I
Right.
think that's really powerful how you brought that out through your story. And I thought it was neat also that you said you didn't write much during the illness time. It was kind of a rest and like a break and just
Yeah.
taking care of yourself and healing. But then on the other side of it, now you've got a totally different outlook
Yes.
on your songwriting, on singing, on encouraging other people, and you've got purpose in your
Yes.
writing. And so sometimes we go through that journey and we're not sure why we're going through it at that time. But then on the other side of it, we see, wow, God was working on me. And I
Right.
was growing spiritually when I didn't feel like anything. You might feel buried, but that
Yes.
sometimes means that you've been planted and
That's
that
very
God is growing you.
that is very true. And two things that you said that I would just follow up with. We often forget that songwriting is there's a gift, but it's also a craft, and you have to hone your craft. You have to spend time. I write some stuff that I just know is awful. I just do.
And
I mean,
that's okay.
what is this? I don't even know. So I always ask, when I talk to people and they say, well, what would be your advice? And practice the art of songwriting. Get your, what I like to call your tools, your rhyming dictionary and your dictionary of American idioms, and use those tools because God gave us those tools, to help us share his word in a new, fresh, and creative way. And I think that is important, that we practice honing our craft. So the anointing, the gifting, the talents, God's words meet that preparation, and it produces something so powerful. And also, one of the things that you said, I just had like a revelation about, if you would have asked me before I got sick, I would have said, I write songs because that's what I feel compelled to do. I write songs for me. But I think I realized just in this moment, I don't write songs for me. I write them because I feel compelled to write them, but I write them because there is something that the Lord wants to say to his people. And that, I think for me, that has given me a greater purpose, because then, it's harder to slack. It's harder to be like, I don't feel like writing right now, because then I remember I'm not writing just for me. I'm writing, because somebody needs this. And that always is stirring up purpose.
Yes, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any final thoughts to share with us before we go and just encourage our listeners who are writing and wanting to improve their skills?
I would say, of course, I would say study. I would say read. I think that songwriters write better when they read a lot. Read the scriptures, like really dig deep into them. Study a lot of the backstories. Sometimes the simplest story can produce something so magnificent. I always think of, it isn't a song, but I think of, the book that came out, The Prayer of Jabez, just based on those, few little lines in a book that hardly no one reads out of the Old Testament. But I would say definitely definitely do a lot of reading, a lot of praying, a lot of practice, and then write from your heart, and know that it's okay if you write a dud. Sometimes you just writing just to write, and it's okay. It's okay. But the song that you always think, at least it seems to be the case for me, the song you always think is going to be the one that is just like, oh, it's usually not the one that everybody is like, this song spoke to me. It's usually some song that, you don't even think. So there's value in every song,
Yes.
Whether or not you sing it to just yourself or you sing it to the Lord or you record it and sing it out, there's value to every song.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sharing your story with us today and encouraging us as writers to just write from the heart and to write for the Lord and to not put so much pressure on yourself to make every song so great, but just keep writing every day, keep up that practice. And I think that's great advice as well. I wanted to let our listeners know how to connect with you online. So if you want to hear more of Naima's music and get connected with her, especially in that Refreshing Life Facebook group, if you need encouragement, that's a great place to find it. You can get connected with her at her website, www.ministryofnaima.com.
Yes.
Naima is spelled Naima, ministryofnaima.com. You can get connected with her and send her a message. Thank her for sharing her story with us and her music with the world. I'll have that linked below in the description as well. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I count it an honor, and it's always a blessing to see and talk with you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a fellow writer. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you in the next episode.